today's video, we're going to talk about what happens when keeping it real goes wrong.
You better sit down, Frank. Sit down,
And specifically, we're going to talk about the recent altercation between UFC superstar Jorge Masvidal, King of Miami, game-bred Masvidal, with Colby Covington, fellow UFC welterweight. The two just had a fight, and there were some words exchanged leading up to that fight, some words exchanged afterwards. Recently, Colby Covington was dining in a Miami restaurant, and on his way out, none other than Jorge Masvidal is there to greet him. Apparently, Masvidal punched Covington at least once, broke one of his teeth, damaged his Rolex, and Covington ran back into the restaurant. Jorge Masvidal disappears. So we're going to talk about today what charges Jorge Masvidal is facing, the likelihood of those charges being successful, and whether Jorge Masvidal could be found guilty. If he is found guilty, what he could be facing in terms of sentencing, and much, much more. I'm attorney Sina Rezvanpour. I went to law school, so you wouldn't have to. I break down the latest news in the legal world, so if that interests you, make sure to like and subscribe. Without any further ado, let's jump into today's video. So as we know, earlier this month, Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington had a fight. I'm an MMA fan. I found their beef to be pretty entertaining, especially because at one point they were training partners, they were boys. I thought a lot of this was just for show. I thought it's just to hype up the fight that was coming up, but clearly it definitely wasn't. Jorge Masvidal most definitely kept it real. And while that sounds fun and it sounds entertaining, it's actually incredibly serious, the charges that he's facing. So there's two that we know of. The first charge is felony criminal mischief. If you damage property intentionally and the damage is worth more than $1,000, then it can be a felony and you could be facing up to 5 years. Masvidal is facing this charge because allegedly he damaged Colby Covington's $90,000 Rolex. Damage could be at least $15,000. The second charge that he's facing is way more serious. It's aggravated battery in the second degree. In Florida, if you're convicted of second degree aggravated battery, you could be facing up to 15 years in prison. But one thing to keep in mind is that Jorge Masvidal was wearing a mask and a hood when he got into this altercation with Colby Covington. Now, why is that significant? It's really important because in Florida, there is a law that says that if you're wearing a mask or a hood when you're committing a crime, that it actually should heighten the level of the crime and make it a more serious crime with likely a more serious penalty that you could be facing. So I say that he could be facing at least 15 years for the aggravated battery charge. Add up those two charges together and we know that Masvidal could be facing up to 20 years in prison. Now that we know what Masvidal is facing, the next question is, will he be found guilty? So to understand whether he'll be found guilty or not, it's important to look at what are the defenses to these types of charges. We'll put aside for now the criminal mischief charge and really focus on the important charge, which is the aggravated battery. Let's look at some of the defenses to an aggravated battery charge. The first would be consent. So an important element in any battery charge is that the touching that you did to the person, the way that you came into contact with them, was non-consensual. That would be, for example, if Colby dared Masvidal to punch him or encouraged him to punch him in the face, maybe just to prove how tough he is. We know from what we've heard that that's not the case. Now, it's not exactly a defense, but the next thing we should talk about is mutual combat. So if two people decide to get in a fight together and do it the old-fashioned way, then that could be a reason why someone wouldn't get charged or wouldn't get convicted of aggravated battery. We know from what Colby is saying that that wasn't the case either. Another defense is to say that you didn't have the sufficient intent to commit battery. That means that mentally you weren't thinking that you wanted to actually hurt them. From everything that Masvidal has said before the fight and after, we know that that's not going to fly here. And the last defense is to say that it's self-defense. I don't think that you can really argue that it's a self-defense. It sounds like that Colby was on his way out of the restaurant, had no idea that Masvidal was going to be there, and Masvidal, basically comes out of nowhere and punches him. I don't know if that's exactly true. That's what we're hearing, but it doesn't sound like self-defense is going to be a defense that's actually going to work for Jorge in court. Masvidal could be facing 20 years or so in prison, and it doesn't look like any of the defenses that are available to him are going to be successful. He basically announced ahead of time that Colby Covington was on his hit list. He saw him, he kept his word, he attacked him, And afterwards, he showed no remorse. He went straight to social media and he posted about it. As much as I love Jorge Masvidal as a fighter, he really didn't do his lawyers any favors. If I was his lawyer, I would be looking to strike a plea deal as soon as possible. But the likelihood of him seeing no prison time is pretty low in my opinion, which is really a shame as an MMA fan because Masvidal's been entertaining. He has more of his career left. I think it's probably gonna get cut short by this legal trouble. The UFC likely is gonna wanna also do some damage control of their own image. Earlier this year, there was another case of a UFC fighter going after vigilante justice, and that was Cain Velasquez. It's kind of interesting that both Cain Velasquez and Jorge Masvidal did something that probably a lot of people agree with, but they're facing serious charges. But like it or not, that's our justice system. Do you think Jorge Masvidal will be found guilty? And if so, how much time do you think he could be facing? Also, let me know if you think Masvidal and Cain Velasquez are being wrongfully charged. Would you do the same thing if you were in their situation? If you find yourself in some trouble, the less you say, the better. And whatever you do, stay off of social media. My name is Sina Rezvanpour, and this is not legal advice.